All right, welcome everyone. My name is Brian Miller. I am the Director of Strategic Education Outreach at Wonder Workshop, creators of Dash, Dot, and Q robots. And I have with me Derry Stevens here as well. Derry, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Derry Stevens, and I'm Director of Community Marketing. I taught for over 10 years and joined Wonder Workshop about a year ago, and loving everything we do with our little clever bots.
Yeah, and I've been with Wonder Workshop for over 2 years at this point. Prior to that, I was a kindergarten teacher, a K through 5 computer teacher, and director of Edtech at one of the largest private independent schools in the US. So we're really excited to be here with all of you today. You can follow us on Twitter, as you see below. You can reach out to us via email afterwards at our email addresses, but we're more than happy to always continue the conversations as we progress and move beyond here as well. Also, there's a community built around coding and robotics on EdWeb, which Wonder Workshop, we are the sponsors of, where you'll get all sorts of community resources for free. There's free online discussion boards. All the EdWeb webinar recordings are located there. There's quizzes where you can receive continuing education credits and certificates, and you can see all your EdWeb activity on the home page. And when you're ready to join, you click on that little image that you see on that right-hand side, which are those 3 people. That will take you right in, and you're able to access all of the EdWeb webinar archives, where you can see all the videos that we've done. And we do them pretty much every single month on different topic areas, along with the rest of the videos available on the EdWeb community. Finally, to get your EdWeb continuing education certificate, since you are present, you will receive yours within the next 24 hours. And if you at least pre-registered it or you logged in with your email today, which it asks you to do, you'll be getting that in your email in 24 hours. Now, if you're watching the recording and you're seeing this later on, you're going to need to take the continuing education quiz after going and watching the video, and then they will email you your EdWeb webinar continuing education certificate. All right, so we already introduced ourselves, so we can briefly skip over this, but is there anything that you want to add about what you do at Wonder Workshop, Derry?
No, I think my favorite thing is, helping manage the community and the Wonder League robotics competition. I get to hear from teachers all the time. And like we were saying before the webinar started, I'm constantly amazed at the innovative, creative ideas that teachers bring to us and how they're using the robots as teaching tools every single day.
Yeah, and for me, I would have to say mine is the ability to go out and work with schools and districts across the world on advocating for and helping implement computer science into schools. So if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to us directly, and we're more than happy to get you all started with integrating computer science along with Dash, Dot, and Q into your classrooms. All right, so at this point, we're going to power off our videos, and we can go ahead and we can move forward.
Sure. So the first thing we wanted to do was hear from you guys. What do you think are some different kinds of PD or professional development? We've started framing it more as professional learning. But in your opinion, you can throw your ideas up in the chat. Let us know, what do you think in your mind, quote unquote, counts, or what do you get value from when in terms of opportunities? So I could start off and say, one that I find, I'm going to throw in the chat here, are webinars, because that's what we're on. What other types of PD do you guys either interact with or attend on a regular basis?
Yeah, I love Twitter. Oh, yeah. So Maureen shared that she loves EdCamps. I love EdCamps. And if you're not familiar with EdCamps are unconferences where they are free for educators to attend. They typically take place on Saturdays, and it's designed where you go in and you share your thoughts, your ideas, your resources, and you build a board for the day of what will be talked about. And there's no set presenter, and you just go in and you collaborate and share ideas. And for me personally, those are my favorite types to attend because you're constructing it and designing it the way you want it to be and the way you want it to feel.
Somebody else mentioned videos. I'm addicted to TED Talks. And I just find the quality of video, even if they're not, highly professionally produced videos, just the fact that anybody can create a video these days and post it and share their thoughts and perspectives, you just get such a diversity and a plethora of ideas.
Monty said connecting with his personal learning network on Plurk. and interacting with questions. Yeah, so being able to have a location that you go to where you can share ideas, thoughts, resources, ask questions from people, it's a great way to do it. I see lots of Twitter chats, book sharing. Um, there's so many incredible ways to connect and learn from everyone in the community. I'm looking through here to see if there's any that I am unfamiliar with, but it looks like we've pretty much nailed a lot of them. Yeah, Monty said using those hashtags on Twitter. That's extremely important, so you know exactly what you're searching for. And if you're ever looking for a list of hashtags to follow, just Google educational hashtags, and you'll find a hashtag for everything. And then when you use that hashtag, it'll pull out all of the tweets that correspond to it. So there's so much wonderful information that people are able to share right through Twitter, and it's live, on-demand professional development.
Yeah, that 24/7 connectivity for the Wonderly Robotics competition this year, we were using Edmodo for our coaches cohort. And it was great because I could post, answer questions, but then just watching the organic communication between, we had coaches from 63 countries this year, and having them correspond with each other on an ongoing basis was just so powerful. Brian, if you click to the next slide, one more. You know, we were looking at this in terms of kind of a continuum, and these were a lot of the ideas you guys mentioned, you know, social, these digestible bite-sized pieces that you can grab and go anytime, anywhere. You can follow people. Then, you know, a little more involved were webinars like right now, scheduled or archived. You're carving out an hour of time. PLCs and PLNs, conferences where you, apologies for the background noise, or at the Q conference in Palm Springs. You know, and then workshops, but then you get into the more involved where there are the MOOCs or the online courses that are now readily available in so many different ways these days.
Yeah, for me, I personally love the social media. I am a learner who likes doing it when I want to do it, whether it's in the comfort of my bedroom, in my pajamas, or, you know, on the go while I'm driving, because I'm all over the place. And some of my best professional development happens when I'm sitting on an airplane or, you know, just simply driving in a car. So the fact that all that can be right there, available live, and on demand is so important for me.
So now I'm curious, when you think about best practices for teaching, taking ourselves out of the mindset of PD, just think about your everyday teaching. What are the best practices that you guys use with your students? If you go to the next slide, Brian, just one. So what are those strategies that really hook your kids into the daily learning? For instance, I always found in teaching early elementary, I'm going to type one in here, you know, prior knowledge, making those concrete connections to prior knowledge and letting kids have that voice to tell me what they know and what they were excited to learn more about. What other modeling and facilitating? Thank you, Monty. What other teaching strategies do you rely on that you find most effective and impactful?
Yes, Amy,
Yes.
Student choice.
I was just going to say voice and choice.
Yep. Prior knowledge is important, but even if there isn't prior knowledge, you know, being able to provide them the knowledge that they need to be able to go through some of these activities.
Some people are mentioning, reflecting and cooperative learning, getting at those 4 C's. Yes, real world connections, Frank.
All right, you want to see what we came up with, Gary, in our list?
Sure.
All right, let's see. So we came up with a lot. We were sitting in the car going through and just rattling off all these different phrases and keywords that really stood out for us. And you can see collaborative is in there, inquiry-based, high interest, hands-on, connections to the prior knowledge. So a lot of these things you've already shared in here. The ability for creative expression in their, you know, being able to show what it is that they know, differentiating their instruction. It's authentic and has real world application. It leverages tech. We know that engagement level goes up when students are using technology in their lessons. High energy. I mean, we are on stage 24 hours a day, and students know immediately if you're having a bad day before you even walk into the classroom. They can feel it, they can sense it. So coming in with that high energy is so important for students to feel effective with their learning. Project-based, providing voice and choice. These are all important strategies that we thought were important to us. And being able to go through this chat here and see the stuff that you're sharing, it's obviously just as important to all of you.
But was it interesting when Brian and I were talking about this webinar a couple of weeks ago? Both of us have done a lot of mentoring and working with teaching graduate students, and having been teachers ourselves for so many years, there's just a disconnect when it comes to then professional development and a lot of professional learning opportunities. And that here are all the qualities that we extol and preach and strive to do on a daily basis with students. And yet we forget that teachers are learners themselves, regardless of age and experience. And our opportunities don't always capitalize on these kind of qualities that we hold near and dear.
Yeah, so let's ask them the next question, because it kind of leads into that.
Mm-hmm.
What has your experience been like when it comes to professional learning? And it can be positive experiences,
Mm-hmm.
negative experiences. We're just curious, what has your experience been like when it comes to professional learning? Yeah, so Frank is saying it's sometimes a mix. Yeah, most are helpful, but some are less than interesting. Yep. Sit and get.
Monty, I've never heard that, but that summarizes, unfortunately, a lot of what I've experienced. I've heard one and done, but I like the sit, get, and forget.
Totally.
You're right, Rosemary. It can vary quite a bit, and it also makes a big difference in terms of who is planning and leading, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I've learned is, you go into some of these professional development experiences that could be like what Monty said, sit, get, and forget. But what I've seen is with a lot of people, including myself, is we dismiss a lot of presenters immediately based on their previous teaching experiences or what their previous background is, because it doesn't relate directly to you. And for some reason, we as educators, we as human beings, we dismiss people immediately if we can't find that, direct relationship to what we're doing. And oftentimes we rob ourselves of some incredible learning opportunities because we say that it's not relatable to us. And for example, it could be an athlete that comes in and speaks to the teachers about resilience and failure. And the message could be about failure, but the second that a teacher who may be teaching art or music says, oh, it's an athlete, it has no interest to what I'm doing, they shut it off and they don't listen to what the greater message is. So, no matter how bad some professional development can be, we can always get something from it. So I think part of our role as educators is to find those pieces for us that relate to us directly. All right, so let's see what we came up with here. Do you want to talk about this one, Derry?
Sure. So we were looking at some recent research and kind of, like I mentioned, the disconnect. So this has a little bit of the more negative angle that, unfortunately, a lot of the professional development that public districts spend money on tend to be these experiences that are either overcrowded, they're a one-size-fits-all, one time at the beginning of the school year to kick it off. They tend to be didactic lectures. They're irrelevant. They might not tie to either your grade level, the skills that you are looking to work on with your students, or your prior experience. And they tend to be sometimes outdated in their methodology and passive. You end up being that listener that, as Monty had said, is just sitting there and taking it all in. And we're all experienced learners, but we still, there's that need for that quality professional development and those learning experiences that we will take with us as we go forward.
All right, and with that said, let's move on to the next slide, discussing some of the adoption strategies that are available.
Sure. So this is one of my favorite images. This is E.M. Rogers' diffusion of innovation theory. And what Rogers was looking at is this idea that when there's something new, we often see this related to the adoption of Edtech, for instance. People tend to break down into different categories. And it's kind of on this bell curve. They're the innovator, the early adopters, the early majority, late majority, and laggards. So when we look at something like, with Wonder Workshop, when we talk about coding and robotics, we see a lot of people fall in this innovator category, this 2.5%. That's a really small amount, or the early adopters, but with us, at least kind of our mission is we want everybody on board and understanding the importance of coding and robotics. So how might we use professional learning opportunities to reach this early majority or late majority? And it's just kind of a good reflective, some of you might be familiar with the SAMR model, Ruben Pointeras, where you're looking at, fall in terms of like EdTech adoption. And it's just a good reflection. It's not bad to be in the late majority. It's just being cognizant of that and then thinking, okay, what do I need to do to then move to that next stage? You're not going to jump all the way to an innovator category in one fell swoop, but what are you going to do? I always had said to teachers, what are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do next week? And then what are you going to do next semester? And that way it just makes it more attainable when you think about goal setting. The next slide, Brian, if you show this one, this is just I should say a comic that I've seen a lot. Again, when we're talking about EdTech and this influx of new tools coming into the classroom and the ever-changing digital landscape, where do you think you are in this illustration? You have the EdTech enthusiasts on the left, you have the mainstream on the right, and then you have some folks that, they're interested, they find it intriguing, but for whatever reason, they're straddling the chasm. Maybe they don't have the time or they don't have the resources at hand. So our question to you is, how can you find people on kind of to support you? How can you form that bridge? If you're more on the EdTech enthusiast side, how can you help bring people across this chasm? How can you leverage people, whether it's in your school community or in virtual communities like this one? Because sometimes folks don't have others at their school that they can necessarily lean on right away. So how do you make those connections and find those resources, which may be human resources?
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'd look at some of the needs around professional development, and we pulled some, we will share this slide deck, and so you will have the links to these studies. But this first one is from the State of the K-12 Market from a couple of years ago. And, everything moves so quickly. This is 2014 we're talking about. And unfortunately, it still kind of proves true today in 2018 that there's just this overall need for high quality, not only high quality, but sustained professional development opportunities. And because, as educators, we have social factors affecting our daily classrooms. We have national and state standards that are changing and kind of impacting the way we teach. We have technology and tools that are coming in an exciting way, but sometimes overwhelming on a daily basis. And then if you look at that second quote, it really gets to the fact that we often in these professional development opportunities learn about the what and sometimes the how, but we don't always make concrete connections to the why. And as teachers, we really need that bigger picture and that broader vision so that we can make those connections and then pass those on to our students.
Yeah,
and that's the way we
also need to come from leaders too. So we're going to get into that eventually and hear about the implementation strategies as well.
Because that's the only way we're going to get to those meaningful shifts. Behavior change is hard. Research shows that, to change any sort of behavior, it can take up to 5 years. And when we're talking about students in the K-12 landscape, we often don't have that time. It's high stakes when you're talking about working with children.
But also even with, schools and districts, oftentimes we are stressed where we don't have time either. Because the government says you have a year to change things around depending on what your score of your school is. Or, there may be a school closing down and they give you a year to kind of turn things around. So even, that, and when administrators and leaders come into schools, they don't take that, that 5-year number into account. And they immediately expect that change is going to happen overnight because they're under new leadership, and districts think the same thing too. So, we have to look as educators as to how can we, look at what we're doing to make that change faster. Because if we all jump on board and realize, hey, we're going to make a change, then it's going to occur a lot less than those 5 years.
I have an informal rule. It's not based in research or anything like that. But when I look at when I was teaching and changes would come down the pipeline or new tools, I discover online, I'd always look at them through the lens of kind of what I call my 3 E's. Is this tool or this strategy or method going to be efficient? Because, we don't have any extra time. So is it somehow going to help my efficiency? Is it going to be effective? So is it going to help, my learning goals? And then also, is it going to be engaging? Because to me, they were kind of, effectiveness was the practical side. Efficiency was the practical side. Effectiveness was obviously tied to my job as a teacher. And then engaging, I just wanted to help instill lifelong learning.
Exactly right. All right, you ready to move on to the next?
Yes, please. This one I thought was interesting. So this is from Teachers Know Best, which we're going to give you the link to on the next slide. The Teachers Know Best is a series of research studies that the Gates Foundation have put out. And if you've never looked at them, they're worth taking a glance at. I think there are about 5 or 6 different ones now. And they're short research studies. They're well presented in terms of the data, lots of rich visuals. But this one was their one that they did on professional development, where they went to teachers and asked them what they thought. And these numbers were just staggering to me, that $18 billion is spent on professional development. And as many of you said in the chat, you're hungry for it. You're sponges, you want it, as long as it's quality. But then when it's broken down, we're talking about 68 hours. So $18 billion is spent, yet most typical teachers only get 68 hours, which really is, a week to 10 days per school year. And when we think about all we do and all the different changes that come, as they should, as things evolve, it's not a lot of time. So this is, for instance, just to give you a quick visual of what the cover shot looks like. So if you just go to teachersknowbest.org, you can download all these different studies. The one on professional development I find really interesting. They have a great one on digital tools that are effective for the classroom, some of teachers' favorites. And then out of this study, these were just 2 stats. 29% of the educators that they surveyed were highly satisfied with the offerings, which, is encouraging. But if you then think about, the 71% who obviously weren't highly satisfied, what does that really mean? 34% think professional development has improved. So again, progress, but is it enough? Again, considering the high stakes and how we want to keep evolving as educators.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, this is a real eye opener. It just shows if they're not highly satisfied with their current professional development opportunities, then what are they taking that they're completely dissatisfied, and how do we educate people to steer clear of those experiences, because we don't want them to experience, that same number of dissatisfaction. But like you said, it is good to see that there is a level of improvement that's happening, because, I think companies are really trying to figure out what works best for teachers and really listening to that, and improving the professional learning experiences.
Yeah, and that's why I applaud the Gates Foundation for doing these studies, because they are getting the teacher's voice heard. And I think awareness is a big part of that. And like you said, Brian, then companies like ourselves can turn around and think, how can we make it better? How can we respond to what teachers need? And when you look at the factors of, in terms of what are the barriers, not surprising to any of you, I'm sure, number one is time. That teachers just don't have the time to invest. And how do we make those opportunities and carve out time for teachers to have those meaningful learning experiences? Funds are an issue. Good old budget. Finding that expertise or that diversity of expertise. How do you tie these opportunities to incentives? And then there are some barriers often when it comes to direction and or leadership. And then how do you quantify and qualify these experiences? So how are we making sure that as we shift or try new opportunities, that we're constantly asking for feedback so that we're iterative and improving for teachers as well as students. And then resources, just resources, whether it's in the workshops or then follow up within the classroom. I can recall countless workshops where I heard all these great opportunities and wonderful manipulatives that I could use in the classroom. And then I turned around and I didn't have them to try these new techniques. And so the great ideas quickly dissipated.
And also resources that are available to anyone, no matter what their socioeconomic status is or their location throughout the world. Finding, quality resources that apply to everyone and make it very easily accessible.
Mm-hmm. And then the last, I think this is the last one we had from this study, was just looking at the fact that kind of teachers fell into these two camps in terms of they either viewed professional development as really just like this compliance activity, a checkbox that they had to tick off twice a year as part of their obligations to a district. But then again, they loved the idea of professional learning, and especially when it came to horizontal and vertical planning opportunities. And they loved working on grade level teams and strategizing about new learning experiences and activities that they could do in the classroom that tied to standards or whatnot. So it's just this dichotomy of when the time is carved out, it doesn't always match the quality of what teachers want to spend the time on.
So next is funding. And I mean, when we're dealing with schools and districts from across the world, they're constantly struggling to find out what type of funding is available. So what we wanted to include are some of those resources that we said, while you're receiving professional development, being able to actually walk away with some resources. This is a resource that you're able to use. But we've put together STEM grants and funding resources, many of which you can use to apply to professional learning. So being one of the largest issues, obviously, that was in that list was funds. We have to figure out ways to make this accessible for anyone to have the correct funding that they can use for when they're looking for professional learning. So Naomi Harm, one of our education strategists at Wonder Workshop, has written a blog article all about that. So you can read a little bit more and find creative ways to bring funding to your schools. But there are some great ways to bring professional learning. And you can do it in a number of different ways. But some of my favorite things that you're able to do is reach out to these different companies or these different businesses that are looking to provide funds through grants. And we've pulled out all those resources that you need, everything you need as far as who to write to, what they're about, what they cover. And you can easily find ways to bring funding available into your classrooms. And in a lot of cases, it could be personal, where you want to raise some money just for you to take some of that money and apply it to your personal professional development, whether it's a subscription to something or the ability to go somewhere. Those are all important pieces to continue your personal professional development.
April just asked a great question. She said, if I could ask a poll question, it would be, do you use PD to learn something new, or do you use PD to become trained on a specific program or EdTech in your school or organization?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so it's kind of at that more intrinsic level about something you want to learn about, maybe a little broader, or something that's more immediate and maybe being used already in your school or district.
I think it needs to be a mix of both, because we want to continue to understand different theories, different ways to teach, different best practices as practitioners. But also there are district initiatives that are coming down the line that, in order for us to be successful, we need to understand how to use those tools, resources as well. So I think there needs to be a marriage of both. But what I see a lot of as I'm out in schools is that they're doing either all of one or all of the other. And I'm going through this list and I'm seeing people rattle off both, all the way down the line. And it needs to be an opportunity for both. You need to provide teachers an even amount of tools and resources that the school requires. And then you also need to provide them ways to think differently, learn something different that is beyond what they've previously been doing. But like I said, what I'm seeing a lot of is just either the one or the other.
Helena, we will we will share that link to that blog article too. And then these slides will also be available in our
in the EdWeb follow-up.
Web. Thank you. So you'll be able to find it there.
Yeah, and you can flip back through this presentation as well, and those links are clickable also, so you'll be able to access it that way too.
April's poll question, though, is a good segue to this next slide about the digital opportunity. You know, and I would like to hear from you guys too, in terms of which platforms that you find really helpful, because nowadays I think, you know, we have those opportunities that are through our school and districts, whether they're workshops or series or whatnot. And those might be more immediately applicable, it's already in place, or a new resource that has been brought in this school year. With the digital landscape, there are so many ways to capitalize on, you know, more maybe topics that are high interest to yourself, whether you're talking podcasts, webinars, videos, articles, MOOCs. Of course, you know, there are ones you pay for if you want credit. There are other ones that are free and are online. A lot of tools also obviously have product training and communities where you can share a lot of ideas. So if you flip to the next one, Brian, you know, when you think about this digital opportunity, there's just a lot of benefits to the digital world, as overwhelming as it can be. Learning can be just in time. It can be on the go. I know I have about an hour-long commute nowadays. So there's lots of time for me while I'm on the go to be listening and to podcasts or whatnot and taking in new information. There's a lot of voice and choice, more than there ever has been. Often these options can be low cost. You sometimes have to search around for them, but you're not pigeonholed into something that's expensive, because we know teachers spend a lot of their own money already on their classroom endeavors. Brian, what did you call this one for comfort? PD and your PJs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You know, whether it's during the day or early in the morning or later at night. You also have access to expertise unlike ever before. And just that diversity of perspective and experience. People from across the globe. We've seen a lot of folks, you know, in the chat here from all over the world. So it's just an opportunity to make those, to be part of that global community. Something I'm really excited about, which I've seen with students, but I'm seeing educators more and more, they're creating their own digital portfolios. So as you do these professional learning opportunities, how are you capturing your evidence of learning, those digital artifacts? And, you know, how do you build and curate your own digital portfolio, your resume 2.0, to show what you've done, what you're interested in, what you're taking your own time to dive deeper on? Then with all the digital opportunities, there are so many ways to easily capture the seat time. And like I said, that the different pieces of evidence of your learning. And then there's a big movement afoot, as you know, around digital badging to recognize the extra mile you've gone and also where your expertise, your interests lie. And then it's easier now than ever to kind of take these digital experiences and apply them to some of the incentives like continuing education units.
And I want to add, I'm so glad that we included in here global community, because, you know, we're a part of a community right now, like you mentioned, from across the world sitting in this EdWeb webinar. But the thing that I want to remind people of is we're all experts in something. And you may be doing something creative in your classroom and want to share it with the world. So go out there and do that. People want to learn from other people. And in a global community, we're allowed to do that, especially through the use of social media. So the ability to tweet out a picture or post something that you've seen and learned on Instagram, or connecting with a group of people on a Facebook community, or, you know, sharing something with your community of learners that very second if you Snapchat a video. There's so many different ways to connect and share the resources and tools that we're using, and the ability to, you know, connect and share best practices. So the more we do that, the better the more opportunities we're gonna have to learn from each other, rather than just also relying on, you know, the same one or two people that we always go in and watch and listen to. That's personally why I love being on social media and being able to share a lot of this stuff out, because I learn something from everyone every single day, no matter where I am in the world. So the next is the strategy. Yeah. Go ahead, Barry.
No, I was just going to say, I'm going to let Brian tee this one up, because he's He's our head of strategic outreach at Wonder Workshop. But something for you guys to think about is it's kind of a two-prong approach. Some of you were talking about your titles in the chat. And so, you're the tech leaders and you're probably responsible for bringing these types of meaningful professional development opportunities to your teachers. But similarly, those of you who aren't necessarily in those positions and are just trying to find some quality professional learning, opportunities, these are the kinds of questions you can ask your school leaders too. So then it becomes, a collaborative approach to making sure that when time is spent, that it's being well spent.
And yeah, completely. And I think that for me, whenever I have the opportunity to talk about, leadership or strategy around schools and development, I want all constituents that are related to that school a part of the conversation, because strategy, typically the conversations happen with the higher ups, and educators don't always fully understand why decisions are being made. And administrators and leaders don't always understand why teachers are asking the certain questions that they have. So it's great that both parties are in here, because there are administrators that are part of this webinar today. There are teachers that are part of this webinar today. There are tech coaches that are part of this webinar, because these are so important that everyone is on the same page as we develop strategies as far as best practices. So these are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself and your community as you are going through a professional development process of choosing what it is that you're looking for. So the first one is, who is leading this professional development? There are so many different ways that you could do this. We have so many expert teachers in our schools that can help do this. I love when a school does a teachers teaching teachers type of event where they're learning from each other, because that is the most low cost way of doing this that's possible. I also love when students are the ones that are doing the instruction as well. We talked about voice and choice a little bit earlier, about getting the voice of everyone. So getting students to be a part of that voice and choice and sharing their interests and sharing their expertise is so important as well. So identifying who those leaders are that will be leading these sessions. Next is, whom should be involved. Who do we want to be present? Does everyone need to be present? Are we going through a train-the-trainer model where we want just the lead people to be there and then they can go around and disperse the following training after that? So really understanding who it should be, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, or I saw someone mention in the chat a one-size-fits-one, which I think is great. And it's so true. So really being supportive of who is going to be there in that space, and is it really appropriate for them to be there at that time? And that really gets into, what are the goals of the outcome? So is the goal to, train everyone and get them on the same page, or is it to expose them to something new or get them to implement something? These are things that you need to ask beforehand. And you have to ask this question even before it starts. You want to lead them up with what the goals are and have them be a part of that goal-making process. Next are, what are your objectives? What are you going to have them accomplish while they're there? I don't like going into sessions or conferences where I don't know what the objective of this is going to be. You go in kind of very hesitant and reluctant and trying to decide through half the time, is it even appropriate for me to be sitting in here? So if I come in with those objectives and know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and what my goal is going to be after it's done, I feel a lot more confident going in. What are the tactics? How are you going to be deploying it? What is the budget? Is it going to cost you anything? There's free ways to provide professional development, and there's really expensive ways to provide professional development. You have to determine as a school what's best for you. Now, I see a lot of times that there are schools that send one or two teachers or a handful of teachers to conferences, and that's fantastic, but that costs money. So what can you do on top of that? You can bring the experts in. That also costs money. But you want to determine what's going to be best for your budget within your school. What are some of the options for execution? So how are you going to deploy that into your schools? And how are you going to follow up? And this is the piece that is dropped the most after any professional learning or professional development, is how are you going to follow up? What are you going to do to continue this conversation after this has gone on to make sure that everything is continuing? I can't stand when I would go into sessions or professional development workshops where we were sitting in a room for 3 hours or for an entire day, and we learn something new, and then we don't ever talk about it again. And that is, for me, the most meaningless professional learning, because I want to be able to have a conversation about it. I want to be able to build a task force around it. I want to see changes happen based on what we're doing. So follow-up is so important, and to have them understand what the follow-up is going to be before even going in, so they can figure out what the initiatives are going to be after they're done, rather than asking that question after it's over. All right, Derry, you want to talk to them about March 20th?
So we have a big announcement that is coming on March 20th, and I can't say a whole lot more. I can tell you it's a programmatic initiative we're doing that's called, next slide, Brian, Teach Wonder, surprise, surprise. But if you can read between the lines and kind of pull those nuggets of what we've been talking about today, we will be offering to our devoted educator group, I think a really neat program. So do stay in touch and do kind of watch our site, because on March 20th, we will be able to tell you all about it. And it kills us because we thought we were going to be able to give you all sorts of exciting details today. But unfortunately, we're been told to stay mum until the 20th. So.
And that's okay. We're giving them something to look forward to on March 20th. I see the hmms and the sighs, but we're really excited about what we're going to be able to share with the world. So, like Derry said, be sure to stay tuned. Follow makewonder.com for the up-to-date information on that. And if you're a part of our mailing lists, which you can sign up for on the website as well, you'll be getting emails directly too. So yeah, so there's people that are super excited, which we're excited about as well. It kills us that we can't talk about it yet, though.
Just know that you guys have been asking us for stuff, and this is we've gotten our response in line, and so we're just excited to be able to share with you what's coming. So Brian, why don't we look at yep, this is our final slide, but we can look at the questions. Do check educate.com. We do have specific guys are educators, so everything from our curriculum to our Wonder League robotics competition. Soon we'll have a new page at teachwonder.com on the 20th. So lots of things just for you guys, turnkey resources, best practices and tips, all about Wonder Workshops resources, and then the wonderful world of coding and robotics.
So at the very top, you have a question box, and I don't see any have popped up in there yet, but there's the little question mark button where you can go in and you can type in any questions that you have regarding professional learning, best practices, anything that we can share with you all, or, what are your hobbies? We're happy to talk about that too if you want, but feel free to use that question box. The chat room's not the best place for it. But the question and answer box is for us as well. So we'll give that a minute to have you go through and share some of your questions.
Happy to answer anything about professional development, anything about Dash, Dot, and Q.
Yeah. Otherwise, we nailed it, Gary. No one's asking any questions. Nailed it.
It's so neat that we thank you guys for taking this time out of your busy schedules. And it's so exciting to see you from all over the globe. And some people here are connecting and know each other, which is awesome.
Yeah, we were a little, I think we broke the 300 mark at one point of live attendees. So a question came in from Maureen Jimenez. Do you recommend Q for elementary or more for middle school? That's
it is. Yes. We designed Q with middle school in mind. And we did that from a hardware and a software perspective. The interface on the app is more appropriate for middle schoolers. We will have a middle school curriculum coming out for Q at ISTE in June. Similarly, we're also coming out with a education-specific app for Q. So right now, any of you can go use the free Q app. But what we've done is we've taken feedback from educators, and we'll have a teacher dashboard and student accounts and single sign-on and just those turnkey, again, those kind of efficiency tricks that we know teachers need and also expect nowadays. So that will be coming out in June as well for Q. That said, Maureen, we've also seen some fourth and fifth grade students really gravitating towards Q. Those kids that maybe had dash and dot in the early primary grades and are ready for that text-based coding. Because for those of you that don't know, Q does quite a bit in terms of functionality, but one of the really cool parts is you can engage with Q using block-based coding, and then with a quick toggle, it translates into JavaScript. And then you can continue coding in JavaScript, toggle back, and it's, updated your block-based programming. So it's a great scaffolded way to take kids to that next level of coding.
So we have another question here, which is this changing technology environment, how can teachers stay current with curriculum?
That's a great question. I think one of my favorites, like you had mentioned early on, Brian, is social media. It's easy to find people who are using whether it's specific curricula, like specific programs, and then find out how they're using it, how they're revising it, tweaking it for their classroom use. Because we know teachers, we always said beg, borrow, steal. You take these great ideas and you twist them and make them your own for your students. And I see that a lot on social media. Pinterest blows me away. They take some of the age-old resources and textbooks and really step it up a notch with some of the creative applications that they come up with.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, like I said, I've been preaching social media is the place for me to do all of that, because we're the curriculum experts, but we may not necessarily have the ideas of how we want to implement technology into this. And because it is changing so quickly, we're constantly looking for new ways to engage students. So because social media changes on a daily basis, by the minute, there's some incredible ideas and resources that are available out there. So that would be my suggestion as well, Derry.
And then I was just going to say too, a lot of these new products that you hear about on social media, when you go to check them out, they have a lot of communities or discussion forums. So this Teach Wonder initiative that we're launching on the 20th, there were some tools that we were experimenting with, and I was blown away when I was trying to figure out a different feature or whatnot. I could go online and I didn't have to go email the company. I could go into the community, ask a question, and somebody from somewhere would come back with just this great answer because they had already encountered the same issue and solved it. So there's just this 24/7 kind of support out there nowadays that I find just encouraging.
Here's another question that came in from Frank. He's involved in the FIRST robotics program, and they use block type coding. And he's wondering what others out there would recommend for younger elementary students that he can build on. So, Derry, this is right in your wheelhouse with the Wonder League robotics competition.
Sure. So, Frank, I don't know if you know about our Wonder League robotics competition, but we have a competition that's for collaborative teams, ages 6 to 8, and then 9 to 12. And next year, we're going to add an older age category on too, now that we have Q in the mix. But this year, starting last August, we have now had over 7,000 teams, again, ages 6 to 8 and 9 to 12, engaging in these virtual collaborative missions. So these teams from 63 countries all over the world are working together. Most teams are about 3 to 4 kids working on these. This year, our theme was Space Island. So they were doing these community development challenges. And it's all about creative problem solving. So the teams work through these 3 missions. And then right now we have, I think it's 225 teams in our final invitational round. And those those finalists are doing one final mission and competing for 2 $5,000 STEM grand prizes. So what's great for the younger kids is there's no travel involved. It's a free competition, so there's not a high cost barrier to entry. A lot of the kids this year we found didn't necessarily do all 3 missions, but we hear coaches who are teachers like yourselves, parent volunteers, librarians, Girl Scout, Boy Scout leaders, engaging even just in one mission over a matter of weeks. And they say the collaboration and the teamwork and the dedication and perseverance is what they find so rewarding. So that's one to check out on our site. If you just go to education.makewonder.com/robotics, I think it's hyphen competition, but you'll see it in the nav. You can see examples from the past 2 years. This is the third year we've done it. And it's just so exciting to see how quickly it's spreading.
Great. Here's another question that came in that's really interesting. Besides staying current in curriculum, how are you staying current in your teaching certification? We were just talking about this today, I think yesterday or today, Barry. Instead of taking a Florida computer test, I may be taking a business test to teach a computer class. So what are ways to stay current in our teaching certifications?
Yeah, I think it depends on also your state and what they'll take as evidence of. But I was just saying to Brian, it was yesterday, wasn't it? That
Yep.
I have a California Clear credential that I've got to make sure I keep updated. I think it's this year. I personally try to do speaking opportunities at conferences. I also try to engage in low cost learning opportunities. So recently I took an InDesign workshop just because it was something that interests me and I love creating and designing, but I had the time nor the training for something that in my mind was more design-esque, but definitely as classroom applications. Workshops are another one. If you can, I try to avoid the one and done, but like the 2 and 3 day workshops, and often you can find ones that are more of a series, so you can do it over time. Those are the opportunities I try to take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, like Derek said, it varies by state and what their requirements are. So I would suggest speaking with your professional development coordinator and find out what it is that they'll accept for continuing education credits, because there are some things that you can do, whether it's attending the EdWeb community like you're doing right now and receiving this webinar, you can get continuing education credits for that. Picking up a class that interests you in a school like you were mentioning, attending additional school workshops or going to ed camps or participating in chats. There's some schools that allow Twitter chats to count as long as you document your involvement. So there's some great ways that you can do that. But it does vary by state. Now, some of the things that I've done to stay current has primarily been attending conferences, and that's equated for most of the need for the school that I was at previously. But conferences, again, are wonderful, and webinars and being able to get those certificates. And we can't yet talk about March 20th yet, Derry, but I think that we'll be solving some of that problem too. So March 20th will be a good date to share a lot of this stuff.
Yep. April has a good question about momentum. How do you keep the momentum going?
Yep.
Yeah, I think, one of the things you can think about, April, is how do you involve teaching teams? I always found it really powerful if you had a team do some sort of training or experience together, they tended to feed off of each other. And then, as Brian had alluded to earlier, then the conversation inherently keeps going because they're working together on a daily basis and they can apply maybe the new strategies and talk about what worked or didn't work. Similarly, if they can't all go to the same opportunity, my old teaching team when I was in Los Angeles, we would often divide and conquer. So one of us would go to the math conference, one would go to, something more to do with language arts and reading, or somebody would go take Lucy Calkins' writing workshop experience. And then we'd come back together and, good old classroom practices, share out and exchange what we learned, and then all kind of plan together those next steps. And that was just a way to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, and I would say for me, a large part of this has been on a personal level, carving the time out once a month where I know that I'm going to do some sort of professional learning for myself, whether that's picking up a book and reading it, or listening to an audiobook, or like you, Derry, watching TED Talks, or going in and taking a webinar or participating in an online course. I need to carve the time out in my day, because if I don't, I will be sucked up by lesson planning or event planning or other things that are happening in our daily lives. So to keep that momentum going, I carve out once a month where I know, and I have a little checkbox where I say, yep, I was able to do that for this month. So that was really important to me. But also when you're in your schools, I think a large part of this comes down to leadership as well. You know, keeping that momentum going and not making this a one-off thing where you see it once and you never see it again. And because that happens a lot, that is very discouraging to teachers where they finally may feel that they have a tool or resource that they're excited about, but then there isn't discussion about it any longer. So you as an educator, you as a leader, you as someone who wants to continue exploring this for your classroom use or for your grade level use or for your school use, you take the leadership role and do that. Maybe offer an opportunity where teachers can come in and see what it is that you're doing with your students using a particular tool or resource. Giving the opportunity for students to share at a faculty meeting what they're doing in this case, or you as an educator share with other educators at faculty meetings, or even going out there and sharing those resources at conferences. So we have to consciously, a lot of times as the teacher, make those moves to keep the momentum going, because again, it's not in the leadership's vision to have that a continued basis. So we need to speak up, or we need to take it into our own hands.
Dr. Ravi has been asking some amazing questions here. I'm going to try to sum up some of my thoughts based on all of them. Some of the questions have to do with, leveraging technology in developing countries. And if you're introducing too much technology, why can't we depend on robots instead of teachers? And what would be the ideal ratio? And I think there's no easy turnkey answer to this. It's more to the fact that with the ever-changing digital landscape and considering there's theory out there that in the next 20 years, we're not going to have 20 years of technology growth. We're going to have 20,000 years of growth, which can be a little overwhelming if you're a kid or if you're an adult. So I think there's no turnkey answer around like ratio or what's the right number. I think it depends on the tool. Some tools, like Wonder Workshop robots are actually almost better utilized in small collaborative groups. There are other tools out there that are designed to be more one-to-one, a student with a device. Again, it depends on the goals and the design of the product we're talking about. I personally think that teachers are an immensely valuable part of the equation. Teachers are the artisans in all of this. And so we're the ones that are thoughtfully bringing in those valuable tools. I definitely think technology can be leveraged. I was hooked into Edtech. I worked in inner city schools for so long. And the first year I had a smart board. I just remember thinking if I had had this when I worked in Compton, the things I could have done, because I had a room full of 44 kids and I had 10 books total. So, the opportunities and the exposure I would have had with a smart board and that teaching situation would have been amazing. So there are ways to leverage technology. I don't think technology will ever supplant, though, what a teacher brings to the classroom. We're the ones that get to know our students on an individual basis. We're the ones that kind of do the matchmaking between learning goals and learning resources. We can help be those motivators and cheerleaders when it comes to developing lifelong learners. So that's my soapbox answer to those really tough questions.
Nope, and you nailed it, and it looks like everyone's agreeing with what you said too, and I echo everything that you said. So with that said, we want to thank you all for attending. We have our information up here on the screen. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can follow me on Twitter at EdTechNerd. You can follow Derry at Derry_Stevens, and our emails are there as well. So if you have questions or you want to follow up this conversation even further after this, you're more than welcome to reach out to us in either of those locations. As a reminder, you're going to be getting your continuing education certificate. So yay PD, that's what we were talking about today. So you're going to be receiving in 24 hours, as long as you pre-registered or you logged in today with your email address, you're going to receive that certificate that you can share with your school to hopefully receive those continuing education credits. If you are watching this as a follow-up video, after this, you can go ahead and take that quiz, and you can find the quiz by joining the EdWeb community, edweb.net/code. Click on the EdWebinar Archives image, which looks like the three little people on the right-hand side, and select the EdWebinar you just watched. So join us next EdWeb webinar meeting, Bringing Creativity to STEAM with Drawing and Coding, coming up on March 29th. with Charlotte and Dylan, also from Wonder Workshop, where you're going to get to see and learn about one of the newest accessories for Dash and Q. So once again, we want to thank you so much for attending. Be sure to join the community, www.edweb.net/code. And we hope that you have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone. Thanks again.
Absolutely. And come visit us on the 20th. Thanks all.